So we're going to start with this week's Parsha. I'm going to do a quick overview of it and going to develop a few points from it. You should know it's interesting. We know this already. We were talking about it last week in Houston. It was so awesome to see everybody in person that you could learn a lot about the Parsha from its name. Like the essence of the Parsha, it's in the name of the Parsha. So if you don't have a lot of time to delve into the Parsha, just look at the name and kind of find connections and correlations to your life, personal life, current events, and the time of the year that it's at. So it's just interesting. Parshat Re'eh is now before Chodesh Elul. We're heading towards Rosh Chodesh soon, of Elul, the month of reflection, and then Rosh Hashanah, the new Jewish year. So Re'eh means to see, lirot. There's so much in that one word. Re'eh is all about perception. And people think it's so cliche, but really life is all about perception. As much as we hate to admit it, we could really have a very good life if, one minute, I'm letting a few people in. Shalom Aleichem. Let's see who joined us. I think someone from Israel. I think my friend Miriam. Shalom Aleichem. Is that Miriam Gold? Okay. So this week's Parsha we're saying is in the essence of the name of the Parsha. You could always get the gist of what it's about. Re'eh, it starts very, very powerful words. Last 37 days of Moshe's life, he's giving like a musar shmuz, a farewell speech, which is partly rebuke, all-encompassing love, because he loves the Jewish people so much. Okay, I'm letting Yafa in, I'm letting Rosalie in. And it's all about love. You might seem to hear words of rebuke coming from Moshe as being harsh, but really, if he didn't love the Jewish people so much, he wouldn't care about them. You know, when you care about someone, you're much more aware of the downfalls of their life, because it's like your kids, like you just want them to be on a good path for success. So Moshe Rabbeinu, he's feeling, in a certain sense, like a frantic kind of feeling, like he's leaving them and he was their biggest advocate. So he's trying to cram in as much love, rebuke, guidance, a recipe, so to say, for a successful life. So he's talking about Re'eh natati lifnechem et habracha v'et haklala. Here you see before you the blessing and the curses. What does that mean? If you behave, if you could all mute yourself, because there's background noise that is interrupting the if everybody could mute, that will be good. Okay, so then it can, and I'm going to go back to the bracha and the klala, the curses, the blessings and the curses. What does that mean? And it continues to talk about idol worship, that we're not allowed to slaughter animals, to sacrifice them in any other part of the land. We're allowed to slaughter animals to eat, but not for sacrificing. For sacrificing, we only do it in the allotted place in the Beit HaMikdash. Then it talks about a false Messiah. You know, I just think it's so interesting how, like, I think in our day and age, there are so many false messiahs out there, you know, people who think that, oh, I'm going to save you. I've got it. I have the knowledge. I have the recipe how to completely cure humanity of all its problems, you know. So these people who are so full of themselves and are not true, they don't even walk in their own path. You know, people who preach and not really true to their words. That's a false messiah. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And then it goes into the whole list of kosher animals. Kosher animals, the cattle, animals, birds, and fish that are kosher. And then it talks about tithing, maaser, how important it is that it's one of those mitzvot that God says, test me on it. If you put aside a tenth of your income, a tenth of your produce, a tenth of whatever earning you make, I promise you, and he says it twice, I will double that. I will make you rich. So important to be tithing. It's very interesting, and I mentioned this a few times in our class. My husband has a business relationship with a Mormon guy, and in the Mormon church, they're very big on Meiser, on giving a tenth. They all have to right away, like a tenth of their income goes to the church, and then the church gives it to the poorer families. They have like a system like that. And they happen to be, the Mormons are very, very well to do financially. And my husband thinks it's because they do this mitzvah of tithing, of maaser. Then it talks about Yovel, the 50th year, that is a year of the Jubilee year, that anything that you ever owned, it goes back to its rightful owners, any land that they had to sell because of debt, or it goes back to their owners. And then it talks about the festival, the three main festivals, the pilgrimage, Chagim, Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot. Oh, that dog is so cute, Bobby. Does she suspect that she's going to the spa or not yet?
I think she suspects she's not going to be happy.
Oh, I could
she
tell.
likes it there.
I'm sure she does. She's so pretty. What a pretty dog.
Thank you.
And then, so now we're going to go in depth in a few of the points. So, ראה נתתי לפניכם את הברכה והקללה. See before you the blessing and the curses. That's interesting. Moshe is talking to them as a whole. So the whole time when you're looking through the speech, and if you know Hebrew, you're seeing the grammar he's talking to them in a plural way, because he's talking to them as a nation. But yet he starts the sentence about Re'eh natati lifnechem, see before you, I'm showing you right now, the blessing and the curses. It actually is in a language of singular language. So what's going on? Is he talking to the masses, or is he talking to each and every one of us? So really what he's talking about is like this. As a nation, obviously, we have a role. And together as a nation, we, so to say, create our destiny. As a nation, are we walking in the paths of God? Are we being kind? Are we living up to our fullest potential as the teachers of the world? That's the job of the Jewish people, to be light unto the nation, to be the compass, the moral compass of the world. But when he's saying, Re'eh natati lifnechem, that's singular, yachid, belashon yachid, that is geared to the individual. Why? Because perception is an individual thing. No one could really help you do that. Even if you have a very optimistic husband or optimistic children or an optimistic rabbi, bottom line, the perception of how you're going to perceive the circumstances and experiences in your life have to do with you personally. So that's why he's talking to them singularly. You have an obligation. You can't control what's going to happen to you in your life. We really don't have any say in that. Like what kind of quality life we're going to have, how many kids we're going to have, how much money we're going to have, what kind of health we're going to have, what kind of circumstances, relationships, right? But what we do have say in is how we're going to view the circumstances and the reality that Hashem has brought into our life. So he's saying to them, it's really upon you, the individual. Re'eh natati lifnechem, you have the good and the bad. How are you going to look at it? It really depends on you personally. And you have to understand that even that, so we know that there's this concept of bad and good, right? Good and evil. But there's also that concept of revealed good and hidden good. So sometimes what doesn't look good for me doesn't necessarily mean it's not good for me. Like for instance, I'll give a very simplistic kind of example. My car breaks down. I have to go somewhere, so I'm getting very upset. I start puffing. Oh, I'm so angry. Now it's going to cost me so much money to fix it. Now I'm going to be stuck. My life is always messed up. I'm a victim of these circumstances in life, and Hashem isn't really not looking out for me. And it's just the story of my life is this car breaking down. Everything breaks down. You understand? There's like you could go down in a spiral of just not seeing the good and the blessing in your life. What if you have the same situation happen and you're saying, I guess Hashem wants me to exercise today. I'm going to have to walk everywhere. And Baruch Hashem, I don't know how, but Hashem is going to make sure that the money that I need to fix the car is going to be there, right? So we're seeing a situation that is not necessarily good, right? But it's the outlook, it's the perception, it's re'eh. How are you going to look at it? Re'eh natati lifnechem. So it really has to do with how you perceive it. So important to work on perception. How do you work on perception? Perception, how do we work on perception? Because really that's what it's about, you know? And I'm telling you, it's not a coincidence that we're reading Re'eh right now as we are heading towards Elul. And we're going to be taking stock of our life, perceiving the past year, having perception of what's to come, how we're going to change, how we're going to grow, how we're going to move forward. So our parashot are very much connected to the time of year that we're in. So Re'eh is right now, we have to Re'eh. You got to look, you got to start seeing, you got to start looking in your life. What are you doing with what you're seeing? Are you seeing things bad? Are you seeing things as a curse? Really, the power is in your eyes, you know? And it's such a hard thing and a concept to swallow. I actually once lost a friend because of that, you know? Because I was pointing out to her in a very loving way. She was constantly complaining to me how she was a victim of her husband, a victim of the kids, a victim of her mother-in-law, a victim. So I just asked her a question, you know, have you thought about it that maybe it's how you're looking at it, you know? Is there another way to look at it? Now, I get it that it's very annoying if your friend is doing that to you because you want your friend to mirror you. And I was doing that for years. I was like saying, I hear you, gosh, that's so frustrating. But at some point, sometimes friends are there to help you. And they're there to help you lift you up, you know? And I would want a true friend, to mirror me and hold me and give me space, right? But on the other hand, if I was going down a spiral of like really negative perception that was bringing me to a very bad place, you know, habracha v'klala, literally, if you have bad perception, you can bring yourself to a place of klala, of curses, of a bad place, a negative place. You could go down spiral, really 49th degree of depression. So I was trying to pull her out of it. So she got so mad and upset with me. I don't blame her. You know, I'm not judging her for it, but I'm just saying that there's a way probably to do it. Maybe I got more skilled at this. This was like 25 years ago. But it's sad when you see someone ruin their life because of their perception of it. You know, you're watching them their whole life feeling like they're always the underdog, the victim, the no good for nothing, or life is out there to get them. And really, whatever you say or do for them is not going to help, right? Because it's a matter of perception. So it's not a coincidence that we're reading this week's Parsha this time of year. It's about perception. That's what we guess. How do you change perception? It's like you think, it's a habit. I was born to look at things a certain way. I can't really change that. It's a habit. I'm used to looking at things that way. So really it starts with a thought. You got to find your original thought that's causing you that perception. You got to question that thought and ask yourself, is it true? Is it really true? Does this thought serve me well? Is there a reason to hold on to this limiting thought? Who would I be without this story of this limiting thought? And most times the answer is, gosh, I would be free. If I didn't feel, let's say the story is, I'm always a victim. Life is out there to get me. And you didn't have that tape in your head. It was deleted. That thought was deleted. Who would you be? You would be a happy person. You would be free. You would not be a victim to your thoughts or circumstances or people or relationships. Okay? So how do we change perception? With our thoughts. Go back to the original thought. Interesting, there are two Aramaic translators. One is called Onkelos. He was the nephew of the Roman emperor who destroyed Jerusalem. And he studied Judaism, and he found that was the truth. He was a true Ger Tzedek, a true convert to Judaism. Can you imagine he was the nephew of the emperor, the Roman emperor that destroyed the Holy Temple? I'm telling you, it's an interesting phenomenon that there are a lot of children of Nazis who converted to Judaism because they started like questioning their parents' ways. So like the rabbi of Bar Ilan University, he is a nephew of Himmler, and top Nazis that were part of the implementation and of the final solution. Their children, some of them also their children, but grandchildren became Jewish, And there was a wonderful article years ago in one of the Curated newspapers. I can't remember if it was Mishpacha or Bina or Ami, and they were interviewing these people, and it's just an amazing phenomenon, what's going on here. And I think it's because they couldn't reconcile with what their grandparents did, and they started investigating. And it was, who are these people that you hate so much? And we started learning about these people. They actually fell in love with the people, So one of my dear friends, she was from Germany, and she came to volunteer in Israel in a kibbutz and moved to Beitar. I used to live in Beitar 25 years ago. And she's a true Ger Tzedek, and she has 12 children and married to a Breslov Chassid. She wasn't like a descendant of a Nazi, but she came from that nation, and she went through that same process, So it's interesting. Onkelos, he wrote a translation for the 5 books of Moses in Aramaic, and we have another Aramaic translator, which was Yonatan ben Uziel. Yonatan ben Uziel lived during the Holy Temple, during the time of the Holy Temple, and Onkelos lived after the destruction of the temple. Why am I mentioning this? Because there's an interesting differences between the Aramaic translation of Yonatan ben Uziel and Onkelos. Why? Because they're impacted by the period of time that they're living in. Okay? So now, interesting. How does Yonatan ben Uziel translate the word klala? Because this week's parsha, everybody has to mute. I don't see who's not muted. Okay, I muted everybody. Yeah, let's just make sure everybody's muted, because then it'll be easier to hear me. Yonatan ben Uziel translates the words curse, like the blessing and the curse. He translates the word curse, chalifta, exchange. What, in another word, transmutation. What is a transmutation? There's a thing called nuclear transmutation. Is when a chemical is transmuted, it transfers into another chemical. So how interesting. Yonatan ben Uziel, by the way, when you see a translation, it's really commentary, right? When you're reading Hebrew straight up, so that's not commentary, you're reading Hebrew. But when you're reading Aramaic, it's interesting. It has to do with the perception and the commentary of the translator, because they're changing it a little bit, It's not the same when you're reading a book that was originally written in Italian or in Hebrew or in English. When it's translated to another language, it's got an added dimension of the commentary of the translator. So Yonatan ben Uziel says he doesn't call a curse like we would think as bad, horrible, right? Evil. It's bracha klala, blessing and curse. So he says blessing is bracha, and the curse, he says chalifta, is an exchange, transmutation. It changes into something else. What does he mean? He sees a curse as something that can actually, it stems from the original good. It's still good, but it's hidden good. It's an exchange, but it's going to lead back to good. That's kind of how he views it. How does Onkelos view it? Remember, Onkelos is living during the destruction. He's writing the translation when they were in exile, okay? So he translates it as klala, literally. He translates it as something bad that happens. Why? He's living in time of exile where the good is not revealed, right? They're in exile. That's really what exile is about. There's a thin layer. It's not even so thin anymore. Right now, we're in thick exile, but that's what it is. There's a curtain, so to say, between us and the Almighty, and that is what's causing hester panim. There's almost like Hashem is hiding his face. You remember this game we used to play with our kids, peekaboo? like peekaboo. Hashem is playing peekaboo with us, and He's here. And the name of the game of exile is to keep playing peekaboo and to find God within the darkness. Okay. Now, as I said many times, exile is not just a physical exile where we're just not in Israel. Exile is also mental exile, spiritual exile, intellectual exile. We're there. There's a lot of intellectual exile going on right now. Like if you listen to the news and the kind of values, or I would say disvalues, if you could say such a thing, they're trying to pass as normal, like this should be a value, and it's really not a value, and if you resist against that, you're considered like an oppressed person or a person from the dark ages, people who stand up for family values or not stealing and not gossiping and not putting the others down in order to achieve your agenda. Today, almost like in Western civilization, it's about the I, me. I'm allowed to do whatever it takes to achieve success. It's almost like an unwritten rule, just a terrible thing. And we buy into it. Even people that are involved in Torah, we kind of like this mentality rubs off on us. And that's the danger of exile. We just have to remind ourselves we're in exile. There's a lot of ideas coming through. It's not so easy to see Hashem. It's not so easy to see the truth. It's a peekaboo game. Just move the cereal box, find God, find the truth, find your inner voice. Truth is that we all know the truth, that really on the inside, in our core, we know what is right and wrong. We know we really do. But we get so many other voices of doubt, of fear, of anxiety, of whatever it may be, that covers that very holy inner voice within us. So interesting how these two commentators, translators, are looking at a curse, differently, right? So I think that we are in exile. We hear the word curse. We're like, yeah, there's so much curses. Hashem has given us blessings, but there's so much curses. In order to start redemption, remember, we always talk about this. Redemption is not just some building going to fall down from heaven through an atomic bomb or something and I'll be redeemed. Redemption is a process that you go through. Geula pratit. It's got to start as a personal process. How do you start the process of personal redemption? Is questioning everything that comes into your consciousness and make sure that it's correct, check its authenticity, check to see that it works, So when you're seeing things as being bad, maybe it's khalifta, maybe it's an exchange, maybe it's a process of transmutation, maybe it looks like it's bad because it's really going to turn into good. Maybe it's in the process right now, so it looks like it's disconnected, and this is again going back to perception, that we got to view everything that happens in our life, and everything comes from God, the good and the bad, that everything that happens in our life, in the end, is for the good. It really is for the good. And if we could really know that, we could have such serenity. Everything, gam zula tova, toda, toda, toda. Thank you. Even things that are very blatantly out there, like according to our vision, wrong, like Hashem, like really, why? It's not so important to know the why. It's more the what. What are you going to do with the circumstances of your life? What are you going to do with this given situation? You didn't expect this to happen in your life, and it did. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with what's happening to you? That is re'eh. That is how we could actually, in our own power, turn the curses into a blessing. That's what Moshe is telling them. He's giving them a recipe for life. You want to have a successful life? Yeah, there's a lot going on. God brings all kinds of experiences into your life, but it's really about how you're going to perceive it. So now we are going to talk about some of this very interesting, the kosher animals. So it's interesting that it lists, like for the animals, there are signs. What's a kosher animal? The split hoof has to regurgitate, chew its cud. But when it comes to the birds, there are really no signs. There are no simanim for the birds. There are 24 birds that are not kosher that are listed in this Parashat Re'eh. And basically, if you want to eat a certain bird and it's not on that list of the non-kosher birds, you're good. Okay? So what's going on? Let's even go backwards for a minute. The whole concept of kosher food. It's really about the traits, the character traits of these animals. So it's interesting that the non-kosher animals and the non-kosher birds are carnivores, are animals that hunt and basically eat others. Those are the ones that we're not allowed to eat, right? We believe we are what we eat because we internalize that food and it becomes us. So if we're eating carnivores, right, these animals that are predators, that eat others, we're afraid, we're sensitive, we're very, very... Shalom, Sandra Finkelman. Hello. Okay. So we're afraid to become what we eat. So we're careful about what we eat. We're careful about what we consume. So really what the Torah is about, it's about sanctifying us in all areas of our life. So we started the concept of perception, thought, good thoughts, right? So the Torah is helping guide us to refine our thoughts. And you're thinking, wait a minute, I have no control over my thoughts. We have 60,000 thoughts a day. That's true. But you do have a choice if to dwell on the negative thoughts or not. That is within your choice. Next, the Torah instructs us. It's trying, what it's doing, it's a refinement. It's refining us. So it's sanctifying us in all areas of thought, areas of actions, and areas of emotions, areas of food as well, because we're saying we don't want to consume animals that are predators because we don't want to become predators. We don't want to eat others, we don't want to attack others. We don't want to consume, so to say, others. So that's kind of like the concept behind, the kosher animals. There are animals that do not consume others. So interesting, when it comes in this week's Parsha, it lists 24 birds that are not kosher. There's an interesting midrash about one of the birds is called Ra'ah, from the same concept, same root letters as this week's Parsha, Ra'eh, Re'eh, see before you, behold before you, right? See, perception. So what's the story of this bird? The Midrash tells us this bird is so amazing, has such an amazing eyesight that it could stand in Babylon and it could look at the land of Israel and it could spot a carcass, a corpse really far from Babylon to Israel. Now, obviously, that's not literal because Babylon is where we believe Iraq and Iran is. So there's really no bird that has an eyesight that far that could see into the land of Israel and they could spot a dead corpse and go for it, okay? The metaphor of it is that it's standing, and it's spotting the negativity. It's like we're in Gullus and we look at Israel and say, oh, in Israel, they can't get it together. It's like being biased in the media against Israel, It's like the world, the double standard. I love how, like, yesterday we had a family get together. I'm in Los Angeles. And a lot of my husband's family, they're very assimilated and not really connected so much to the Jewish community and assimilated, they intermarried and all that. So it was just interesting to me that even though they're not very involved, like in any kind of federation or go to synagogue or celebrating any of the holidays, it very much bothered them because they know I come from Israel. They asked me right away, what do you think of Ben and Jerry's? I said, I'm going for Haagen-Dazs these days, And it's interesting that it bothered them. I didn't think it would bother them and that they would recognize it. But all Jews, like, it bothers us because it's obviously such an unbelievable double standard. Like, they're going to sell Ben and Jerry's in China and in Iran, right? In places that are outright violate human rights, but they're not going to sell it in the West Bank, and they're going to stop selling it to the company in Israel that has been employing Palestinians, Christians, and Jews. It gives livelihood to many hundreds of Israelis that are not just Jewish, they're also Palestinian and Christian. So they're going to stop that. So obviously, when ice cream plays politics, they're going to lose, because the Jewish people, even if they're not very Jewishly connected, they see the blatant anti-Semitic stance or flavor within this ice cream. So they're not happy about it. So interesting, this bird, what is so bad about having a good eyesight? Like, why can't we have this bird? Why is this bird like on the list? There's a list of the 24 dirty, so to say, like contaminated, non-kosher birds that we're not allowed to touch or eat. Like, not touch, we're allowed to touch, but we don't eat. What is so bad when the Midrash telling us, oh, we can't eat this bird because this bird has such an amazing eyesight that metaphorically, like they could stand in Babylon and Iraq and see a dead corpse in Israel. So it's really deeper than that. It's like, if there's a bird, right, that all it does, it seizes the opportunity, it can't see beauty. It could just see where are the corpse, where's dead bodies, and just go for it, It means the perception of this bird is negative. So we don't want to consume that bird. Okay. Interesting, right? Now, what does that mean? I was reading this very interesting Hasidic story. There was once, and this is true, a community of Rabbi Shmuel of Kumenitz. That was the name of the rabbi. This little village in Poland, and they had this thing in those shtetls where there would be these traveling preachers that would go from place to place, and they would come and they would give these speeches and preach to the community, and they would make their money. It was like they were Scotland residents traveling on their horse and in their buggy and going from community to community and inspiring people. Once came to this community a guy that was revered as a holy preacher, a guy that he could really, really inspire people, and he's amazing. The community was so excited to have this holy preacher amongst them, and he started to speak, and he was putting them down. This was a very simple community of people who were working hard, who were simple Jews. They weren't very learned, and he started tearing into them, and he started telling them, you're not learned, you're not involved, you're this, you're that. He started just being so negative, and he was bringing the community down. Like, the people there gathered to be inspired, and it really bothered the Rabbi Shmuel of Komenitz. He came after the holy preacher, I'm going to say quotation marks, holy preacher, spoke with the community. He walked into the room with a knife and a sharpener, and he was sharpening his knife, not saying a word. The holy preacher thought the rabbi's going to come and say, wow, that was so amazing. You really inspired my people to grow. Really putting them down is really so helpful because they're going to realize that they've got to be more learned and more connected. He thought he was going to get compliments and he's going to be hired again. They're going to make a YouTube channel of this guy. They're going to love him. You're going to hang his poster all over the shtetl. So that's not what's happening. The preacher realized that the rabbi is angry with him, and he's sharpening the knife, and he says, so what are you going to do with this knife? So he said, so the rabbi answers him, says, when I was growing up, we were taught to go visit the graves of the holy rabbis, that they could help elevate us and inspire us when we go daven next to the graves of this, these are holy sites that could inspire us to grow. He says, oh, that's very, very interesting. So what is the knife for? He says, we don't really have graves of holy people around here because we're very, very simple. We're very simple people here. So I'm sharpening this knife, so I can slaughter you. So we will have a holy rabbi amongst us. He obviously is playing with him. And so he says, oh, no. He got really scared, as the knife is getting sharper and sharper. I'm not really that holy. I really do little sins. Let me tell you, starts to confess to the rabbi some of his sins. No, no, no. Amongst us, we're so simple. You're really still considered extremely holy. Like we're definitely going to slaughter you and we'll bury you here so we could have a shrine for you and we could come, pray by your grave as such a holy, righteous man. He said, no, 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 no. I do bigger sins than that. So he starts to mention some of his bigger sins and bigger sins. And then the rabbi realized he's such a hypocrite, this guy, and he has seen what all that stuff, that the negative stuff that he was saying, he was seeing in these people because he himself has it within him. He encompasses within him this negativity, So he was putting the people down and calling them sinners and that they don't know what they're doing and seeing the disconnect in them and how bad and evil they were, because that's really what was going on within him. And that is the perception that he saw of them because that's who he was. Okay. So the rabbi obviously, tells them, what a hypocrite you are. Look at you telling me all these things that you do. And you just preach this to my people. And it's exactly who you are. Go fix yourself and then go try to fix others, So from this parsha of this bird that always sees negative, is looking for the dead bodies, looking for where, right? It's really, again, going back to perception. Are we this bird, the ra'ah, who sees always the negative, the complainers, the kvetchers? I mean, I know that being Jewish and being kvetchers, it kind of goes together and it's synonymous sometimes. But really, we have to ask ourselves the question, we are what we eat. We don't want to eat this kind of bird that sees the negative, right? Are we that bird? Are we behaving in that way? We don't want. So basically, when we look at the list of the non-kosher animals, it's not just there as instructions, don't eat this. It means don't be this. Don't be those animals. Don't, be something else, The other story that's so interesting that illustrates this point of perception is really what we have within us, is what we see in others. So if you get really irked, let's say there's someone in your life that really annoys you, like you think about them and you say this, or if they call, you see their number on your phone, you roll your eyes, like you just can't stand them, okay? I don't know if you're people like that, but if there are people that trigger you that way, right? You have to ask yourself the question, what is it within me that is so triggered that way that I might have to a certain degree? Let's say you're so irritated by how stingy this person is, right? Maybe to some degree, the Baal Shem Tov tells us a very powerful lesson. He says, if you see something that bothers you in someone else, you might have it to maybe not the same way, but you might have it to some degree. So if you're very irked by someone, and I'm talking about not that it doesn't bother you, that it really bothers you, that they're so stingy that you just can't stand it about them, ask yourself the question, am I stingy in some ways? Maybe towards this person, maybe towards others in my life. Am I stingy with my words of love? Am I stingy with the way I accept him or accept others or accept, maybe I'm also stingy in some way, right? If you see someone who's very anal, is very strict, who's very just non-flexible, maybe I'm not flexible in some ways. Maybe I have some parts of me that are just very looking at one direction, one story, can't think out of the picture. So this is all learned from this week's parsha. And there's a great story that Rabbi Shalom Karlbach tells about Schwarzer Wolf. I don't know if some of you know the story. It's a great, great story. There was a man who didn't have children for many, many years. And he comes to the Baal Shem Tov and he says, listen, I can't go on living like this. We've been trying for so many years to have children. And Shayna, I'm so sorry, 1 second, just checking on the kiddos. Okay. And he said, please pray for me. Give me a blessing to have a child. And as the rabbi said, I'm sorry, the gates of heaven are closed when it comes to regards of you having children. And the guy starts to cry and he says, there anything I can do, anything I can do to open up those gates? And he says, yes, there's one thing you can do. There's a man named Schwarzewolf. And you could go to, if you can hang out with him and be with him on Shabbat, and he will give you a blessing on Shabbat to have children, you will have children. And the man turns around to the Baal Shem Tov and he says, you mean Schwarzewolf? That disgusting, aggressive, primitive guy that lives in our community, that no one wants to be around him? And when he comes to shul, people go to the other side. When he crosses the street, people go to the other side of the street. I mean, that guy? But he trusted the Baal Shem Tov, and he says, okay. And he's trying to devise a plan. How is he going to be able to spend a Shabbat with Schwarzewolf? In Yiddish, Schwarz is black, so Wolf, his name was Black Wolf. How am I going to spend Shabbat with this man? So he decides that he's going to knock on his door right before Shabbat, and he's going to tell him that he's stuck, that he has nowhere to stay, that he lives far away, and that he must let him in. So, he knocks on Schwarzewolf's door, Erev Shabbat, right before Shabbat, and he said, I'm stuck. I was told that maybe I could stay by you. It's the wife. She opens up the door and she's so hideous. She's so scary looking. She's so unbelievably, like, just hideous looking and scary. And he's like, I can't believe I have to spend Shabbat here. And she says, who said you could spend Shabbat here? No one spends Shabbat here. Go to the barn, wait for my husband. And he waits in the barn and he's crying and he's crying. And he understands that the key to holding the key, the one who's holding the key to his blessing is this man, even though he doesn't understand why, because this man doesn't seem holy at all. And then walks into the barn, the silhouette. He sees the silhouette of the Schwarzewolf walking into the barn. And he says, what are you doing here? He says, I have nowhere to stay for Shabbat. May I please stay for Shabbat? And he says, come in, but don't say a word. And he goes in and he spends Shabbat with Schwarzewolf. And he sees their behavior is so disgusting and so ugly to him. The whole Shabbat, the children of Schwarzewolf seem so primitive and wild and misbehaved and not educated. And Schwarzewolf seems to him like just terrible, gross person. And all Shabbat, he's just praying. And he starts to realize, maybe there's something in me. If I'm perceiving Schwarzewolf in such a bad way, and I'm having such a bad Shabbat, and he's so not hospitable, and this is such a terrible environment, but yet he holds the key that could open up the gates of heaven for me. He can pray for me to have children. There must be something in me that needs to change. So all of Shabbat, this poor man, he is doing inner work, inner introspection, and just praying, God, help me to be humble. Help me to understand my flaws. Help me let go of my, my haughtiness and my ga'ava. And I want to be humble and have humility. And all Shabbat, he's crying. And Shabbat is nearing to its end. It's before third meal. And he realized that nothing is changing. He's not getting this blessing. Every time he tries to talk, Schwarzewolf shushes him and says, I said not to speak. And as the sun is setting, he's crying bitter tears because he realized that for some reason he doesn't merit to have children, and he's not going to be getting this blessing. As the sun is setting, Schwarzewolf comes over to him, and suddenly the Schwarzewolf, this man that seemed so ugly to him, so gross, so disgusting, looks like the high priest. A light is shining out of him. He looks so refined, and the wife looks so refined, and the kids, little kids, look like little priests running around the holy temple. And Schwarzewolf says, I know why you have come here for. And don't worry. Hashem has seen your heart in the inner work that you did, in the broken heart that you have. And I'm going to bless you to have children. But one thing, a condition I ask of you, that the child that will be born, I'm letting you know, he will be very great. He will bring a lot of light into the world. he should be called the Schwarze Wolf. And he says he agrees to the condition. Years later, when the Shlomo Carlebach is telling the story, gets up a man and says, I am a Rebbe in a school in Tel Aviv, and I teach the great-grandson. I have a kid in my class named Schwarze Wolf. And when I mentioned to that boy, that's an interesting name, he said, yeah, I am the great-great-grandson of Schwarze Wolf, that famous Schwarze Wolf. That was the child that was born out of the blessing of Schwarze Wolf, you know. So that's interesting. This is a true story, you know. And the lesson of this story is this man that doesn't have the children, he is perceiving Schwarze Wolf as this very primitive, coarse, gross man, because there's something in him that's very thick and gross and disgusting. And that's his perception of what Schwarze Wolf actually is a mirror. He's reflecting to him his own, so to say, thickness. That's what tzaddikim sometimes do for us. They help us mirror to ourselves. So if we are encountering a lot of people in our lives that seem that they are so off base, you know, and they irk us in ways that it just really takes away our serenity, we have to ask ourselves the question, are these mirrors? Are these people in our life mirrors? You know, and we all have one or two mirrors in our lives, you know. It's interesting. I used to live in San Antonio, and there was one house. Literally, they changed tenants every 3 years. But every time there was a family that lived there that I had issues with, and I get along with people. I had to ask myself the question. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't a cursed house. It was about something within me. And until I didn't fix that something within me, I was experiencing these teachers in my life that were mirrors. They were reflecting something within me that I needed to fix. Once I fixed it, I'm not saying that those people changed and became righteous, amazing people, right? But they no longer bothered me, you know? So I remember like one of the women, she was very like rude to my kids and very mean to me. And I just like asked myself that question, what I need to fix in me. I fixed that part in me that I found that I needed to fix. And that person never bothered me again. I didn't have negative ill feelings towards her. And then she tried to be my friend and things kind of worked out. I don't say she didn't become my best friend, but there was also no tension and no stress around it. Okay. If you are stressed from someone or something, ask yourself the question, are they our mirrors in your life? That's really what it is. The bird, the re'eh, is there to teach us a lesson of perception, of reflection, and everybody around us, really. Experiences in our life are a reflection of things that are taking place within us. And once we could fix it within us, those things no longer bother us. So amazing. What another bird? Let's go. We spoke about the re'eh. There was another bird that we're not allowed to eat is the chasidah, the stoke. By the way, the re'eh is a bird named kite. I don't know what kind of bird that is, but it's some kind of vulture type of bird that, like, they're thinking that the biblical re'eh, similar to that bird that is the ones that see the fish and could jump from far away. They see the fish and jump in. They could catch it. I don't know what the name of that bird is.
Shaldag.
Shaldag. There's another commentator that says it's ait, right? Those are carnivores type of birds that eat others, right? We don't want to eat others, right? So we shy away from anything we don't want to be. We don't want to be those things. So the chasidah. Why can't we have a chasidah, a stoke, from the word chasid? Chasidah means like chasid, someone who does chesed, kindness. She's very kind. She's very nurturing. She takes care of her kids. Why can't we have a stoke? You know, might be very delicious, you know. So a chasidah, it's interesting. She's only kind and nurturing to her own kind. She's actually very vicious and mean to those that are not like her. So we don't want to be the chasidah, right? We have to ask ourselves, am I turning into a chasidah where I'm so righteous, where I'm just so righteous that I turn away others. And I'm racist and I'm biased and I'm negative and judgmental towards someone who doesn't fit exactly my narrative. Okay? That's the Hasidah. She's very, very righteous and kind, but only to her own people. That's like the worst kind of chesed. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to meet people like that, right? You know that famous poem, at first they ignored, when they came for the handicaps, and when they came, and then when they came for me, no one was there to save me. So the Hasidah doesn't care about anyone else, You could go, you could die, you could suffer. She doesn't care, I'm going to take care of my children, and that's it. She lives in a bubble, right? We don't want to live in a bubble. A Jewish way is not to be a Hasidah, not to be a stoke. The other concept that I want to speak about, and we're going to end with this one, is very, very interesting. There's a concept in this week's Pasha that we're not allowed to destroy, bal tashchit, not to destroy things. And we have a big question, because when God, and it talks about not to destroy any stone from the altar, that we have to be very careful with the Mizbeach. So we have the big question is, like, when God destroyed the Holy Temple, we say that the Midrash tells us that God, he observes all the commandments that he commands us. So God actually went and destroyed the Holy Temple. Isn't that bal tashchit? Didn't he violate his own commandment that you should not destroy? Right? How does that work? Right? So really, bal tashchit is destroying for the sake of destroying, where there's no benefit for it. Okay? So the commentators go into this whole debate saying that when destruction took place, that the Midrash actually says, thank God that Hashem poured his wrath on the stones and alavanim veitzim, right, on the wood and the stones, and didn't pour his wrath among his nation, right? And he was trying to awaken them to go back to the path. He was trying to fix this relationship. Their sins were driving them, that the relationship between God and the Jewish people was going to be completely severed. So God said, you know what? We need to do time out in this relationship. You're going to have to go to exile. You're going to have to go away for a little bit. You're going to have to think about it. It's not been a little bit. We've been 2,000 years in this state. But I really believe what we're called in ikvotah de Mashiach. We are living, mamish, in the footsteps of Mashiach. Redemption is literally around the corner. Really. I mean, the founding of the state of Israel was the beginning, the atchalta de Geulah, and everything else that's happening around us. There's so much Torah. Look what's happening right now. On Zoom, you could be on you could be on Netflix right now, but yet you're choosing to learn Torah. There's a lot of good that's happening in the world, a lot of Geulah, a lot of personal and national redemption that's taking place. So when Hashem destroyed the Beit HaMikdash, it wasn't destruction for the sake of destruction. It was destruction in order to build us up, in order to restore the relationship with us. He had to do time out. We cannot continue to operate in this way. It's like you could do this with your kids. They're misbehaving, and you put them in timeout and say, this can't continue. When you're ready to come out and behave like an adult, you could come out of timeout. We're still in timeout. I think we're on the way out of timeout. You know how, like, in timeout, the parent peeks in the door and says, you have 1 more minute to timeout. You're coming out. I think that's where we are. Hashem is literally, our job is to do this. You got to move the peekaboo. We got to look for Hashem. We have to have that right perception to realize Hashem is constantly with us, even with the veil, even in the thickness of Galut. Hashem is constantly with us. And so it's an interesting debate that they're having, that Hashem really didn't do bal tashchit. Hashem didn't really destroy something for the sake of destroying. He really put us in exile in order to rebuild this relationship with us. And I think it's a nice thought to end with. A positive thought is that when we are going through things in life that seem like they're bringing us backwards, okay, or downwards, really everything that we go through is there to make us who we are. to make us better. And when you talk to people who go through big tragedies and traumas, they will tell you that the experiences that they went through in life actually made them better people. It helped them to really value what's really, really important in life. So we could learn personally from this, that there's no destruction, because if we're going to focus, I can't believe Hashem is destroying and severing. No, it's really not about that. Hashem is constantly rebuilding us. Within the darkness, there's always light. And all the things that seem wrong to us, or especially like at the end of the year, you might look back at the year and say, wow, Rosh Hashanah coming. And what did I achieve this year? What goals that New Year resolutions that I did last year, Rosh Hashanah last year, what am I coming with to this Rosh Hashanah? Maybe you feel like you went backwards. Maybe you feel like you didn't even go one step further. And it's not true. Even when we take steps back, okay, those steps are there. They take us back in order to have higher jumps. Sometimes in life, we go down. If we seize that moment, we could grow even from those moments that feels like we went backwards. So I give us the blessing. Hashem should help us to grow from those moments, and that it shouldn't be bal tashchit, that we should not waste those moments. We should not be giving into destruction in our life. Say, oh, I give up on myself because here's Rosh Hashanah, a whole year went by and I didn't really achieve anything from last year's list of Rosh Hashanah. Okay. So the positive outlook is, and we do this every year, is to have the positive perception that next year at this time, God willing, we're going to look back at this time of year, and you're going to look back at this year and you're going to say, wow, what an amazing year I had. I learned so much. I grew so much. I saw God in my life. So many great things happened to me. If you could put yourself in that positive state, I can hardly wait to be in a year from now to reflect back at this year and say, what an amazing year this was. And even through those things that didn't seem good to me, that seemed like a klala, they really weren't a curse. They really were a blessing in my life. I give us the blessing to see the blessings. So you should have all a good week. Next week, I'm still in Los Angeles. We will have class. And then following week, I will be broadcasting from the holy city of Beit Shemesh. Everybody take care. I had people from Israel, Los Angeles, and Israel on this international call. So awesome. If anyone wants to add or ask, please unmute.
Devorah, I have a quick question. This is Rosalie.
Rosalie, it was so good to see you last week.
Man, oh my goodness.
I
so
loved giving you
together.
I loved giving you a hug in the flesh. It was so awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, it was just so wonderful to see you.
Thank you for everything that you did. I really appreciate it.
And more so to you, because without you, we wouldn't have all this inspiration. And I loved how you said you could be watching Netflix because that's what I would be doing. I would be having it on, or the news, or the gymnastics from the Olympics, the swimming, something. But
hey, that's not so bad. Israel brought a few medals, right? So we're doing good.
I know. I'm so excited. The second gold medal from the gymnasts. That's right.